two-state solution. They don't want a two-state solution. They want from the river to the sea.
Who do you mean when you say they? There's parts of this book where it seems like you're saying that you've at times regretted being so open about your mental health struggles. Is that accurate?
No, I'm not. I don't regret it, but it's like people have been willing to use it or to create an impression that's just not true. I don't think trolling is going to win any battleground states.
But wasn't that a big reason why your campaign did so well?
Absolutely, because that was never mean.
Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman often finds himself at odds with his party these days. That's despite the fact, as he repeatedly points out, that he votes with Democrats the bulk of the time in the U.S. Senate. Fetterman spent the fall railing against the federal government shutdown. He's unapologetically pro-Israel at a time when fewer members of his party are. We talked about all of that and more in a conversation tied to Fetterman's new memoir. The book, called Unfettered, looks back at a 2022 Senate campaign that saw him suffer a stroke and fall into a deep depression. We talked about that, but started the interview with a vote by Fetterman and a handful of other Senate Democrats with Republicans to reopen the federal government. Senator John Fetterman, thanks for coming by.
No, honestly, thank you for having me on.
We had scheduled this interview a long time ago, and it just so happens that we're talking right when it seems like the government shutdown is reaching an end.
Have you heard about it?
A little bit.
Yeah, you've heard about the shutdown. Yeah, well, that was very front and center of us, and yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it because there's a lot of complications that maybe aren't discussed front and center, but now that's here we are.
You called it a failure when you put out a statement last night, leading up to this vote to begin the process of reopening the government. You've been clear that that's been your point of view all along. Walk us through why. Why were Democratic leaders and other members in your party wrong to push forward with this?
Well, we were as a committed Democrat, it's always been wrong for us to shut the government down. Rightly, they criticize the Republicans when they've shut the government down all the time. It's wrong. It's reckless. You can pull up all the quotes that would confirm that. So now now it might be us driving it. That makes it wrong too. I absolutely support extending those tax credits. But for me, the kinds of chaos and holding our government hostage is unacceptable. And you actually move against, my party's values. And at the center of it, or very much a part of it, are the 42 million Americans, that get SNAP. And eating is really important. And here's where we are. And then other kinds of things, paying our military and all of the other unions. So that's what it's about. And you can have priorities, but it's wrong to go shutting our government down. And that's where we're at.
I wanted to get your response to some of the thinking from other members of the party. I want to quote you something from Ezra Klein, the New York Times columnist, who isn't in Congress, but I think he kind of represents a lot of the mainstream thinking here. And the quote is this: "Shutdowns are an opportunity to make an argument, and the country was just starting to pay attention. If Trump wanted to cancel flights over Thanksgiving rather than keep healthcare costs down, I don't see why Democrats should save him from making his priorities so exquisitely clear. And I worry that Democrats have just taught Trump that they will fold under pressure. That's the kind of lesson he remembers." What do you make of that general argument?
Well, it's just like, that's actually not a fold. That's realizing that it's the kind of chaos that might care more about the kinds of impacts that it's going to have on 42 million people. Like, if you depend on them to eat, that's not a political game. And it's not a political game, as Mr. Klein seems to refer to it as. It's really about our bigger priorities. And I would remind everybody that something neither Musk or Trump has ever been able to do and shut our government down. We have, and we've handed it to them. And that's why I think it's fundamentally wrong. And now, in a longer conversation here, remind us, Democrats designed those tax credits to expire at this year. That's the Democratic Party. That's not something they're taking away. They're saying we can have a conversation to extend them, and I do hope we should. And I think many of their constituents are going to be impacted too. And that's why I think that's a way forward to find that without dropping our entire country into this kinds of chaos.
part of the agreement is that there's a promised vote on these healthcare subsidies, extending them. How confident are you that actually happens, that gets to the president's desk?
I do believe John Thune is an honorable man in their arena, and Trump. I would like to remind everyone with the border deal, and I assumed we'd get rolled for that, and we did. And you can't control what Trump's going to decide ultimately, but for me, it's a choice of, do you really want to risk the kinds of mass chaos that we are quickly descending in? And after 40 days, how much longer? And now it's a fact, too. Flying is becoming more and more chaotic, and that's probably also means dangerous more than it should be. And when 18 out of 22 air traffic controllers aren't showing up, I mean, that's bonkers for me. Yes, I want health care, but not to create this kinds of stress in our system.
I want to shift to the book. And this is a book about an election cycle where you suffered a stroke and you struggled with serious depression. It's a pretty serious book.
Yeah, profound depression. Honestly, I know millions of Americans suffer from it. And to really understand what true deep depression is like, that's part of the conversation in the book. And when you hear the expression that you can't get out of your bed, well, I thought, now that not really, right? And I'm like, no, that's true. That is true. I couldn't get out of bed. And that's part of the lie that you start to tell yourself about depression. And that's when it really becomes dangerous, when it pushes you into the final argument of, now it's time to take yourself out.
Yeah. Last time I sat down with you and interviewed you, you had just returned to the Senate from Walter Reed. It was a pretty emotional conversation. You were still processing your treatment and what came next. I wanted to ask a little bit about that, because there's parts of this book where it seems like you're saying that you've at times regretted being so open about your mental health struggles. Is that accurate?
No, I'm not. I don't regret it, but it's like people have been willing to use it or to create an impression that's just not true. And it's an honest conversation, because a lot of people have had those things, and paying it forward. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me over the years since, people, and it's an honor to speak to people and help them, speak to them, to their experience, because sometimes people can feel alone or where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly how many resources and how much support that they have. And I've always wanted to make that conversation as simple as it can, to just stay in this game, because I've had people in my life made the decision to leave, and it's not a fail. They didn't fail, but that's a decision that they can't come back. Yeah. And how heartbreaking that is, and how sad that is. And anyone's
talking about suicide.
Suicide, yeah, absolutely. And I know that that's not necessarily a big political winner to talk about these things. And I think I was the first elected official to do that, and I think actually Joe Biden considered it too, and I think he mentioned that after I started to have that conversation. And now it's not a weakness. It's just if somebody can get lost.
Yeah.
And that's why, to be a voice saying, hey, look, that's a lie. That's a lie. And I don't know what your recovery looks, but as long as you stay in it, I promise you will get better.
People who've struggled with depression know deep down something you've said. It's not something you solve. It's not something that's it, we did it, I'm going forward. You talked at the time about your depression being in remission. I'm wondering how you consider your mental health today. How are you doing with this ongoing challenge today?
I am the happiest, grateful person ever. Absolutely. 3 years ago effectively, I just won the biggest election in the cycle, and I was on the downhill for depression. Yeah. And it continued to accelerate, and now here I'm able to talk about it and to pay it forward. And now I'm so grateful. honestly. And it's a testament that people that are listening that might be in that place, that if there's value to know that things can get better and will get better, and it's not overnight, maybe a month, but things will get better. And all of the time I can hug my kids, or, Warren Zevon had that, enjoy every sandwich. It's that thing. It's I think I've described it as like a dark gift. I wouldn't ask for it, but if you've had it, you can appreciate life being on the other side, and it's pervasive in our society.
Yeah.
And suicide is an epidemic. And you had the tragic situation with the Dallas Cowboy player, 24 years old. He just scored his first touchdown in the NFL, and he made the tragic, and it's heartbreaking. And I guarantee you, if you could talk to him, he would regret it and he would take it back. And that's part of the finality of it and how awful it is.
Yeah.
And that's why I wish anybody stay in it, no matter how it must feel.
Yeah, you're talking about Marshawn Nealon, just a terrible situation.
No, I read that. I got emotional. Like, I get emotional talking about it. How tragic. Oh my gosh, when it's like even young teens. I've spoke to teens. His father begged. He tried twice to take his life. And I had a 15-year-old at the time. How heartbreaking it is, whether you're bullied into it or you're struggling with your identifying it, whether if you're a member of the trans, and like that's heartbreaking, and you can't, and that's part of this conversation.
You write in the book about having those temptations and working through them, and I guess I just have to ask, how present has that been, and do you feel like you've figured out what the support systems you need are when your mind starts to go down those roads?
I've never. I mean, it's been a lot of flux.
Yeah.
A lot of flux. In 2024, and with the gigantic election, and now here we're living in the outcome of it, and that's why I've been able to just remain very optimistic and also very grateful. I think that the governing principle is just gratitude to be on the other side, and to taste and to feel and experience that kind of depression where you start making those kinds of dark calculations to be free of those things and to realize, no, you can't ever go back to that place.
Yeah.
So that's really where I'm at.
I just want to ask one more question along these lines, because you mentioned this in passing in the book. You had a situation where staffers who were close to you, staffers who are quoted at length in this book, went public saying they had worries about you, ongoing worries about you. And I know you felt that was a personal betrayal, but it did raise the question, if this was someone close enough to you to be in the book, did they have a valid concern when they raised that concern?
No, I mean, the dynamic really changed.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of experts all agree that if someone's concerned about you, I'm going to call CNN. And it's very disingenuous. But now it's like, I've moved on for those things. Yeah. And that's part of the truth where I'm at.
Do you, separately, I read this book and I wonder, do you like being a senator? It seems like you are deeply frustrated with this job and with the system that you find yourself in.
It's incredibly frustrating, but it's an absolute honor to represent 13 million Pennsylvanians here. And I want to be, I'd like to point this out to your leaders, that, my vote record, I'm a 90% vote Democrat.
Yeah.
And it's like people maybe like, really? It's like, hey, and if you're in a marriage and you agree 90% of the time, that must be an amazing marriage. I have people, they joke to saying, hey, I'm 53-47. Well, I'm in a marriage now, yeah. and the 53-47, finding a way forward. But if we need to be the kinds of big tent party to win, and if anyone is troubled by keeping our government open, that's a bridge too far for a Democrat.
Yeah.
I would respectfully submit that, I mean, two people can make a valid argument that it's always wrong to shut our government down.
Why do you think that question comes up so much then? I'm sure you're going to be asked a whole bunch of times as you talk about this book. Do you still consider yourself a Democrat? What's your future in the party? Why do you think that keeps coming up, given the percentage that you're talking about?
I don't know. It's like, that's the thing. To me, I've always assumed, it's like I've never made the conversation or considered changing.
Yeah.
And again, it's a numbers thing. Look through the record.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. 90.6% or something. And that's a fact. And if I represented like a deep blue state, Massachusetts or in Oregon, yeah, but this is the most purple state in the country. And a lot of people and love voted for the other side. And they're not fascists. They're not Nazis. They're not trying to destroy our Constitution and our democracy. And now trying to find a way forward is where I'm in. And that's.
Do you think the president himself is in any way, shape, and form trying to destroy our democracy? Not his supporters, the president himself. I'm just curious.
What I'm seeing, though, it's like I disagree with many of the things that he's done, and I don't understand what the upside for these things. Honestly, people might have been upset just to have dinner with him.
Yeah,
he invited. I mean, could you imagine if Barack Obama invited a Republican? Hey, let's have dinner. Let's talk.
Yeah.
And I won't do that. I'm not going to talk to him.
Yeah.
People were outraged because there was a spouse that wouldn't shake hands of Kamala Harris. It's just like, it's like we have to work together. That's how it works here.
Yeah.
And if I think that's your job as a U.S. Senator, it's like to talk to the president, and that happens to be a different party.
Yeah. But I guess as stuff plays out, how do you describe your ongoing view of what the Trump administration is doing when it comes to, charging Democrats with crimes who led investigations against him or stuff that he talks about with elections? How do you think about this? Is this differences we can work out in the political system? Is it cause for alarm for you? Like what's the way that you weigh that?
Well, of course, I believe that those people those charges were brought, like Bolton was different. Bolton, that was an investigation that started before under Joe Biden, so like you can remove him out of that, and now so like I of course that's unacceptable. I would never do those kinds of a thing, and I know they'll be fully vindicated, and I think that's where we're at. For example, I wouldn't throw a sandwich at a member of law enforcement, but I think that was silly and dumb to bring a charge. If somebody throws a sandwich at me, it's like, hey, I just move on with that thing. We live in a silly time, and you can't all die on 100 hills. You really have to pick and choose where you really are alarming or things that you have to move forward in. And shutting our government down, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think that you're a bad person if you want to shut our government down. But I think it's a strong correlation of people that represent very of a deep blue kinds of a state. And now there's no incentive to reopen it. And
It's clear, though, you're frustrated with your party. I mean, I read this book and you feel like the Democratic Party has totally walked away from the working class people who built this party for 70-some years. You feel like the people that you represent in and around Braddock don't feel a connection to the Democratic Party.
Oh, well, I mean, there, in Braddock, there is a strong connection, and I have lived through this, the Trump and we came up the same time. My first statewide race and his. He ran for president. And I witnessed on the ground that he was making a connection with a lot of those workers, steel workers and other people in the region. And I was like, why is he doing events in these Democratic areas with the steel workers? And I'm like, either he's crazy or they figured out something out. And clearly they figured out something. And he was able to win in 2016. And here we are almost 10 years later, and he is front and center. And what have we done wrong? And it's like, maybe there's some accountability on our side to figure out a way forward. And that's really what I'm trying to work, in Pennsylvania.
What are some specific areas where you feel like Democratic leaders are just off the tracks in your point of view?
I mean, I think Democrats can be allowed to have different views on thing. And I'm very, very pro-immigration, but I think it has to be compatible with a secure border. And, under the Biden administration, 275,000 people are showing up at the border. I mean, that's not sustainable, and we certainly have no path to give them their American dream.
Yeah.
And now we need to secure it, and we do. But I absolutely am appalled and heartbroken. Oh, now they just dropped the refuge. I mean, if you look what's in the middle of written in the Statue of Liberty, take the tired, broken, and sad, and it's like that's the promise of America, and refugees are the very best of us. So I absolutely I disagree with it. And if I talk to farmers, as I often do, and their top 8 issues are labor, 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 because they've targeted these communities. Why? They're hardworking. They're an important part of our economy. I absolutely don't agree with that, and I think that's un-American.
Can I, you wrote one critique of the party that I kind of underlined in the book, and I want to ask you a little bit about what exactly you meant by that. The continued speech and policies against men have not been without consequences. If men are forced to choose between picking their party or keeping their balls, most men are going to choose their balls. What did you mean by that? What were you thinking of?
It just means that, if people begin to get perceived as being anti-men, and then that explains why people turn to and they use phrases like bros or the manosphere, and they make it seem like that. So I think there's been a disconnection.
So it's more how they talk about it than specific policies?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just this idea and just being perceived as more anti-man or, cancel culture, and just realizing that I think that's undeniable, and it's just a lot different kinds of energy that comes out from, and I think that's why a lot of the men have chosen to walk away from the Democratic Party, and we have to figure out why.
Are there specific policies you would change, or is it just changing the way that the party talks about, the manosphere?
I think it's collectively all of it. So why, for example, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
There was a tragedy in Clairton. 2 workers lost their lives. And I was in the Union Hall, and there was a gigantic picture of Trump in the Union Hall. And it's just like, so that's the thing. So can you explain that? Well, it's like part of it, it's this idea. Aren't you dumb? You're voting against your interest. Oh yeah, that's a winner, implying or basically saying, you're voting against your own interests. It's like, well, they have a different sense of values. And that's why it's like try to meet people where they're at on things. And so this idea is the wrong approach, saying you're wrong, you're voting against your own interests. Are you dumb? It's like, no, you have different values. And that's why I respect them and try to find a way forward to make the appeal why that men have begun to walk away from us, and those other kinds of policies too. It really comes down to the cancel culture, and just making it more about things that are not about the kinds of relatable issues that are in front of them.
If it was up to you right now, we're talking about a week after elections that Democrats mostly felt pretty good about, like what kind of...
Sure, but it really wasn't a surprise for me.
Yeah, why is that?
Honestly. I mean, look at the individuals that represent in the Senate. All friends, all great people, represent New Jersey and Virginia. I mean, it's not a surprise when blue states vote blue. And
so you didn't feel like we turned the corner, we got this out of that in any way?
Well, I thought it was like that was great feedback, saying, okay, good.
Yeah.
But this is the second term of Trump. So the same thing happened in the first term. Like there's backlash, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to have a PhD in politics to know that there is going to be backlash against the party in power.
Yeah.
And doing a lot of controversial things like that, of course, there's going to be a lot of backlash on that. And then, I really appreciated what the governor-elect said. That is not a green light to extend the shutdown. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like take the win, and now realize it's like people are activated and they're upset by some of these things, and that's why I refuse to continue to keep our government shut down, because that makes it seem more if it's a political calculation, and I think it's more about a values calculation.
There are a few other things in the book that I wanted to make sure I asked you about. Is it true that you do not have a working relationship these days with Governor Josh Shapiro, your Commonwealth's governor, that you don't even talk?
Well, I mean, it's not as wish I hope it is, but we've always got along great. And the disagreement began on the Board of Pardons, primarily on brothers that were innocent, and I didn't want them to die in prison. And that's where it started, and that's where it ended.
But you wrote that you don't have a talking relationship. How literal is that? Do you not talk to the governor at all?
It's like we haven't spoke. Well, we were part of a meeting recently. Yeah, but that's not new news. But that's just kind of where we at on it. But I've hosted fundraisers in her home.
Mm-hmm.
We were, and we don't have any significant differences on our political views.
So that doesn't affect your work as a senator.
It's not. I mean, it's been well documented about the disagreement that we all centered on some specific cases on the Board of Pardons, and I'm a big believer in redemption in that cases, and it's about innocent men dying in prison.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that kind of pops up in the book a lot is you feel really frustrated at times about how the press covers you. And
no, I wouldn't.
No?
Frustrating, but I think it's just more about where are you going with that?
Well, there was a lot of different lines. Like the New York Times was trying to cancel me. They were trying to get a hit piece. I'm not the first public figure to get fucked by a reporter, and I won't be the last. Like just kind of at a lot of different points of the book, it kind of felt like you feel like the reporters covering you have a personal motivation. And I just want to ask, like, if that's a blanket view, like how you think of this world of how the press covers politics.
Well, it's a matter of when there's two versions, and one is true and accurate, and one isn't, and then to push back. Well, yes, that was the case. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when it's just categorically not true, and it's just an opportunity to disagree and just to describe it as what it is.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's the case by and large? Do you feel like that's like that's the media landscape you live in right now, that people are coming in with a point of view? I'm just trying to understand how you think about this as a public figure who's written about a lot.
What I'm saying, it's like, that's a question I would ask. It's like, what exactly am I guilty of? I suffered from depression, and I made a recovery, and I won an election, and I went on to be an unapologetic supporter of Israel. And I happen to think that we have to have a secure border. Yeah. And I think it's wrong to shut our government down.
And do you feel like that's made you a bad guy in a lot of circles?
No, what I'm saying, it's like, it's fascinating to me how a guy that voted 90% of the Democratic line, and now I've been estranged with some people in the Democratic Party, and I don't really understand. Perhaps even some of your listeners. I voted against cutting, the rescissions about this. I voted against this. Look at the record. For those things, because we have gotten increasingly polarized in this environment, and trying to find a way forward, and because it's my personal views, but I also the kinds of states that I represent.
Yeah. Do you think that just comes back to the idea of there's a strain of purity in democratic politics right now, and you have to be fully in line?
Or it's like describe describe that if I have a problem with a guy that votes 90% of the party line, like are you what's in that 10% difference?
Yeah.
On that, maybe that's if maybe have different views, and I don't judge people on their views, and they make it as personal, and I'm not going to refer to people those kinds of terrible names.
Yeah, yeah. What surprised you the most about coming to Washington? You came in pretty intense circumstances. That's in the book, and that we've talked about. You've been here a couple of years since then.
And how the lack of glamour. People think it's like unless I have a 300 square apartment, and it's like we have to find a way forward.
Yeah.
Based on and now when you're doing it through the most polarized time.
Yeah.
Another thing I disagreed with my colleagues. Joe Biden was rough. Absolutely, he had a terrible debate.
Yeah.
But talk about it in the book. Mine was worse. Objectively, I think that was worse.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to be rough, but I was honest. People can see exactly where I'm at on things.
Do you think he should have run again?
I'm saying it's like if you blast him out, then then you need to own the fallout from it, and that's the point. I got in an argument with my colleagues. It's like, hey, we all agree he had a bad debate, and I can't imagine their reaction after my debate. Oh my God,
Yeah.
And they didn't say yes. They just kind of like, maybe. And I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I don't blame him. And I'm saying it's like if you get what you've demanded,
Yeah.
then you have to own the outcome. And
because you campaigned for Biden, you campaigned for Harris.
Yeah,
Your faltering didn't change.
Absolutely.
But do you just think it was a bad debate, or do you think there were broader problems that maybe Joe Biden was too old to be president for 4 more years?
I think that Trump is politically, he has figured out things, and I've witnessed it in Pennsylvania. And after the assassination, he was shot in the head, and he was able to respond in a way, fight, and those kinds of iconic pictures. And that was shocking. And thank God his life wasn't taken.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if what happened with the tragedy of Charlie Kirk?
Yeah.
Where would our nation be?
Right. It grazes his ear. He pops back up, and it seemed, and he.
Yeah. Well, if someone shoots you and you're able to respond in a way, imagine if that was Barack Obama. What would that mean for Democrats if somebody tried to take him out? And then after that, and then another part was when after Vice President referred to him as a fascist. It's like, then I'm like, hey, that's that tells people saying
this was the closing argument from Vice President Harris's campaign.
No, more than a closing argument. It means it's like, well, the people that have voted for him in the past, that we need to get them over on your side.
Yeah.
Well, then that means you must be a fascist too.
Do you think, because we've talked about this a couple times, do you think it's a matter of talking about things to not turn off voters, or do you think it's a matter of your colleagues are overreacting to the things that are happening in the Trump White House when it comes to what's in bounds and what's out of bounds, when it comes to what's within the norms, what is concerning for democracy?
Well, I'm not the gatekeeper. It's like someone wants.
No, but what do you think?
Well, what people think, like I'll give you an example, like the ballroom.
Yeah.
Like I've been to the White House a couple of times, and it's a living space. It's not a monument kind of a thing. And now I think actually Bill Maher just said, kind of my view. It's like, you can't have dinners there. You're putting it in tents. And it's like they're building a new facility. And now if you look at all the changes that other presidents have made about the White House in the past, it's like, hey, you know what? It was shocking to actually raise a part of the White House. But for me, that's not my hill. It's like, all right.
What is your hill then? Like what's one or two hills for Senator John Fetterman that this is something that
Yeah,
paramount
well,
issue?
for me, it's the expression. Sometimes you pick your battles, and sometimes they pick you. And for me, that quickly became Israel.
Yeah.
And for me, that moral clarity, and I agree for the death and the misery, and it quickly became for the Democratic Party who you want to blame, whether you blame for the tragedy on Israel or you blame that on Hamas and Iran and those people. And I've just, for me, it's Israel. And another hill is like shutting our government down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is.
We talked about the shutdown hill. Since you brought it up, I want to ask about the Israel. You were very clear. You were very out front about that. You never changed your tune. I'm wondering, as the Israeli attacks and bombing of Gaza continued, were there any points where you second guessed the place that you had staked yourself?
Well, I think we can have to talk about the context of what Israel was able to accomplish. Because they were able to neutralize and destroy Hamas, and the same with Hezbollah. And then they had an opportunity to take out the Iranian nuclear facilities. I was the only Democrat that supported that. I was actually charging for those things. That comes from Trump. Well, then I happen to agree with it. Mm-hmm. And now, can you imagine if they would have acquired a nuclear weapon in there? And now, what is behind this constant violence there? Is it Israel, or it's because Iran funding these proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah doing these kinds of terrible things and what they've done? And that war would have ended when you sent back all the hostages. And agree. It's like, hey, everyone, it's like that by definition, that's how you end a war. It's like, the loser just handles over his weapons.
So at no point in the conflict did the balance shift for you as you thought about this in the context? At no point with, 69,000 Palestinians dead, did you think,
well,
I'm going to be contextualized?
If that's the fact, but no one breaks down how many actual Hamas fighters or other people that were involved on that, so we're not really sure. Mm-hmm. And now the only time you see members in Hamas is when they're handing over funerals and then in shiris and rallying. Otherwise, they embed themselves in the civilians, and they were forced to fight a war through an urban situation. Whether it's why they have all the tunnels under hospitals. Why can't people condemn putting tunnels under hospitals and embedding themselves in where civilians are?
Yeah.
And, because they can't fight a real war. So that's why they use civilians as human shields. And that's the tragedy. And Israel never described the death of Palestinians as necessary sacrifices. That was actually Sinwar. He described as this, they are necessary sacrifices for Palestinians to die.
So you stake this point of view. President Biden was a staunch supporter of Israel when he was in the White House as well. But you've seen how this issue has changed with Democratic voters, with fellow Democrats in Congress. If this is such an important issue to you, how do you move forward in a party where it is a deep, deep, deep divide?
I knew I would lose. I would lose support. It's like a difference between not understanding versus knowing, but following that I described like the moral clarity, and that's what I've chosen to do. And here we have peace, and I think the peace deal was a big deal. That was front and center for our country, politically as well too. And now I can't. Why we can't just celebrate? What's accomplished now? Finally, it's
a halting ceasefire at this point in time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised that it takes because people all realize this can't continue. And now finally, we have the path forward because Iran has been put in check. And now all the experts that maybe have been on NPR or in the New York Times, they've been wrong, consistently wrong. And what Israel was able to accomplish now makes peace real possible now. And that's why reflect on a lot of these kinds of declarations that just turned out was never true from experts trying to describe the situation.
So going back the last few years, a lot of the people who voted for you in primaries, a lot of your colleagues in the Senate were saying all along, the U.S. needs to put more pressure on Israel when it comes to the financial aid, the military aid. The United States needs to prioritize human rights and make some of this aid conditional. You thought all of those pushes were wrong.
No, what I'm saying, like, if you are withholding resources for Israel, that undeniably strengthens Hamas or Iran. Mm-hmm. And that's, and if they want to take that size, that's good on them. But I am very firmly, unapologetically, and now it's part of the irony is like some of the most left part of my party are supporting the kinds of regimes that have absolutely none of the kinds of values that we want to live and we want to project. Where that exists is actually in Israel. Members, gay and trans people, they can live their lives in Israel. In places in those other, that's absolutely unacceptable. And gender apartheid and all those other issues very much against progressive kinds of values. And you only place where you witness that, and that's in Israel. And that's part of the truth in this dynamic. So
I'm hearing you talk. Is it fair to say that you think the Middle East is a more stable place, a better place now than it was 2 years ago?
What I'm saying is that I would remind people that they had the opportunity to have the two-state solution. I did an event with Bill Clinton, actually almost a year ago. And as I said, hey, thank you for your work on this. And yeah, he reminded people like they were offered 96% of the West Bank. They could have had East Jerusalem as the capital of it. And they could have spent over the last quarter century rebuilding their own nation, but they rejected that. And then they elected Hamas. And then that turned into more chaos and more bloodshed. And that's part of the conversation too. It's like two-state solution. They don't want a two-state solution. They want from the river to the sea.
Who do you mean when you say they?
What do you mean?
Who do you mean when you say they? Are you talking about Palestinians? Are you talking about Hamas? Like who?
What I'm saying is Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution. From the river to the sea is like what's in between those two. It's like they want to destroy Israel.
I guess I'm just wondering how you thought about all of the people who live in Gaza who were not part of Hamas over the last few years. Like how did you think about that as you decided?
That's part of the tragedy. That's part of the tragedy. That's why you have to destroy and neutralize Hamas. That's a cancer. That's an absolute cancer. And I want the very best for the innocent Palestinians. They deserve to live in peace, and I hope they can. And finally, if you can address the cancer of Iran and Hamas, then there's a possible to rebuild Gaza. And how could you possibly rebuild Gaza if Hamas is part of their governance?
How confident are you what you just laid out is not a very popular view within the Democratic Party right now, as you know?
It's like that's 8%.
Yeah. So how confident are you that in 3 years' time, whoever the nominee is for the Democratic Party for president views any of that in that way? Or if the nominee is somebody who's deeply skeptical of Israel after this war?
Well, I know it's become very popular to become more and more anti-Israel in my party. I strongly disagree. And now a lot of the candidates now are taking on these very kinds of negative views. And I feel differently. And for me, that's been part of something about the moral clarities. And I'll be a Democrat that represents Pennsylvania and tries to find a way forward. And they would know what I believe and what I happen to think is true.
I hear what you're saying in moral clarity, and I'm just trying to represent the other point of view here, that a lot of people saw moral clarity in entire cities being destroyed and lots of children dying. And they thought, I have deep concerns about that.
Am I concerned about it? Yes, absolutely. That needs to end. And the second that they sent back home all of those poor hostages, there is peace now. And now there's no more that kinds of a war. And if you, like, it comes back to the basic question, who do you blame for those circumstances? Israel or Hamas and Iran, and I firmly hold them. And I saw that Israel and Gaza, Dems pull out at 8%.
Yeah.
I know how that goes. And
I guess you do keep saying there's peace. There's been a lot of back and forth. There's been ongoing airstrikes and stuff like that. Are you confident? Do you feel like this peace is going to hold long term?
I do. I do believe that, because what's changed? All of the nations in the region now say, they're holding Hamas accountable and saying, hey, like this can't continue. We have to find a way forward to rebuild Gaza, and now it's part of the Abraham Accords, and that's a framework for peace. And
do you think President Trump? Did you prefer President Trump's policies toward Israel or President Biden's? As somebody who was deeply staked in this and paying attention.
I followed Israel. I followed Israel in that war, and now I happen to agree with both presidents at some point, but at some point that I start to disagree with the president. Like you can't really try to have it both ways. Yeah. And I understand things in Michigan. You had to just I don't know, and it's ironic, and that's another thing that it's never that I've there's parts of Democrats we're now pressing to not vote for Harris, uncommitted. I've never done that. I campaigned all across my state for Kamala Harris, and there's part of my parties, they were uncommitted, and that's just strange. Where why would you do that? Because if you vote for someone other than in that election, then you are effectively voting for Trump.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I want to bring it all back to this, to wind this down. You're saying several things at the same time. You're saying, I am a Democrat. I vote with my party 90% of the time.
Well, no, I don't say that's a fact.
Yeah.
That's
okay, we're talking about several things. Yeah, I'm just saying, we're talking about that fact. We're talking about the fact that there have been deep fissures on Israel and other issues where you are and where a lot of your party is. And we're talking about the fact that you feel like the party needs to work on accepting differences, on coming together. And I'm wondering how do you think about your relationship with whether it's voters, whether it's people who are organizers, whether it's members of Congress, who you do have those disagreements with. How do you view the disagreements, and how do you work through them from your point of view?
I'm saying it's like my values are reflected in my votes. And if you're in a relationship or whatever, when someone agrees with you 9 out of 10 times, I think you probably should get along pretty well. But
there's a lot of relationships where that 10% takes up a lot of headspace.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know. And unfortunately, or the reality, they all kinds of collided at the same time, after the election. And I witnessed that the election was slipping away from us in 2024, and the kinds of mistakes that we made. It's like now, the kinds of votes and the kinds of values in those circumstances,
Have you decided yet if you're going to run for Senate again?
Oh, it's like I'm not talking about 28. Who knows about that? It's
know how long these things go. I mean, just is that something you're thinking about, yes or no, or do you have an idea in your head?
Well, it's just asking about what's going to happen in 28. It's still 2025, and I'm like, that's where we are. But I'll like and the people, if they're listening, what's important to me are that I'm not changing the party, and I didn't vote to cut the funding, that has impacted this. I know and I love people that are big fans of NPR as well. So that's part of the truth. I know a lot of people that love Fox News, and I know a lot of people that love NPR and things. And I read the spectrum, and it's like I don't want to be in a bubble. And I would encourage people it's like challenge your views or see what's behind it. But for me, for lack of a better term, I'm fascinated that a 90% vote Dem is have people put me at odds. And now,
Are you talking mostly about responses in your Twitter feed? Are you talking about the news coverage? Because it does seem to bother you.
no, I'm not alone. I'm not online at all. I mean, it's like I participate in networks or social media, but I've never actually been in it. Like I do produce the actual material, but I don't.
Well, you're talking about reading tweets in your book.
Well, can I get back? Can I get back to that? It's like I made the mistake after the election. I did a deep dive, and it was astonishing. It's astonishing, and it's like I'm never going to come back for that, and I'm a lot happier. And I ask people at the room, after spending 90 minutes online, do you feel better about yourself or the world? And not one hand ever comes up and say, yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And that's part of the addiction too. And that's part of TikTok, and that's why I think the Democratic Party, the youth that vote, 17-1 on the pro Palestinian or to pro-Israel, 17-1 ratio. And it's like if the algorithm keeps, and then pretty soon it's pretty easy to lose, the perspective in that. And so I am not online, so I don't follow it. But I know this morning I checked my colleagues online, and they all got terribly ratioed.
Yeah.
I mean,
voting to reopen the government.
Yeah. And that's the point. And that's part of the truth too. And if Democrats are unable to say, I am deeply troubled by having 42 million Americans live in this chaos about food insecurity, or we have to pay all of those folks. And I do not want to be involved with making flying any safe or more chaotic.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable view. And after 40 days, and I'm willing to bet a lot of my colleagues that keeping it shut down are doing a lot of fundraising over that.
Yeah. And
monetizing that. And, so that's part of it. And do we want to fight our party on the 10% that are you allowed to agree or disagree on those things? And that's a conversation. I don't know what the right answer is. But that is a fact, and that's not my opinion. That's just look at the record. But it's like I'm constantly asked, "Are you changing your party?" I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like saying it's like, "Hey, are you a vegan? Are you vegan?" No. I keep saying that, but people keep asking because and then I try to say it's like I'm listening to an audience that might be in that space too, and it's like, that's not happening. But, it's like, but if you keep asking it makes it seem like it's more to it. And that's part of the frustration.
But you're a smart guy and you've been really successful in politics. And you have to know that when you talk about Israel the way that we just talked about Israel and had that conversation, that is a top tier issue for so many people who are deeply involved in the Democratic Party. And they're going to feel really angry that that's your point of view, even if you're seeing broader support across the state in your approval ratings or whatever. Like you have to know that will take a prioritized view compared to other issues.
Well, overall, I think I'm 10 or 11 points up. Look at some of the other, like whether it's my leader or other people, they're deeply underwater. To be up 10, 11 points in the most difficult state in the country, it's like, hey, and it's like, if you're unhappy as a Democrat voting 90% of your time in a deeply, deeply divided state, and it's like, there's a difference between having bad political instincts or just voting that you're willing to vote and support things, even knowing that some people might be angry by voting in those type of ways. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. People are upset if I vote for someone. And I give the example, if people in Pennsylvania listening, I voted for Secretary Duffy, and I didn't call him names.
Transportation Secretary.
Secretary Duffy. And, I worked together to restore $1.2 to $3 billion in projects that were cut in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That's significant and that's important. And that's why I vote for those folks. It does not mean that I agree with them politically on everything. It's saying we work together and we want to find and fight for wins. And that's, because there's no upside except online to call people names. I don't think trolling is going to win any battleground states, and take that for what it really means. And if that's your vehicle, good on you. But it is an honest conversation now of.
But wasn't that a big reason why your campaign did so well? The way that your staff poked fun at Dr. Oz and pointed out he was from New Jersey. I mean, like having Snooki record a video is kind of a little bit of trolling, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because that was never mean. That was never mean.
So that's the difference to you.
Yeah, like that was never mean. I refused to turn it into say all kinds of things. Yeah. And at that time, or in the summer of 22, that was the main tool that I had because I was recovering from the near fatal stroke.
Yeah,
that too. It's like trolling. And being effective online is important, but you also have to be something to back it, to just make an argument to carry like these kinds of states like Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Senator John Fetterman, thank you so much for talking to us.
No, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to your leaders, to your listeners, because I never, cut your funding. And if most of you are Democrats, I am you. And I'm sorry if anyone has felt I let something down, but I just have some values in 10% of a lot of these things in front of us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Senator.
No, thank you.